Darkest of night with the moon shining bright. There's a set going strong, a lot of things going on. The man of the hour has an air of great power. The dudes have envied him for so long. Oh, Superfly, you're gonna make your fortune by and by. But if you lose, don't ask no questions why. The only game you know is do or die.
So in the Cadillac, we have 3 sets of wires that are all text flexed. There's speaker wires down each side, and then there's also signal wires going up to the radio, to the DSP control, and to some other stuff in the middle of the car. All of these wires are text flex, color-coded text flex, and there's a little bonus thing that we'll get into with the creativity side of it. But there's also the controls for the radio on the steering wheel. There's controls for the radio on the factory screen, just like it is, normally in the car. But then we also have the DSP control in the center where the old change purse thing used to be. We also have the control for the DSP screen up in the mirror. Again, we'll talk about that in the creativity section, but all of these things work together so you can drive like a normal car, even though it has a big, huge stereo in it, without being distracting at all. All these wires run down to the back, and they come into the area with the amplifiers and the processors. So the DSP controls plug into the processors, obviously, and then all of the power and ground for the DSP go to the factory fuse block, and then the amplifiers go to their own fuse blocks that go to the battery. Now, electric cars have a lot of voltage on them, so we worry a little bit about what's going to happen if there's a problem. So we ground the power and the ground on the amplifiers so we don't have to worry about it. Also, all the wires are text flexed. They're all completely secured up to the sides here. All of the ends are labeled, but on top of the labels, we also put QR codes on there. So the QR codes will take you to the owner's manual or the product page on the internet. There's even a couple of YouTube videos that I've made that explain certain things with the car. So when you scan them, it takes you to whatever you want it to go to. All the speakers have waterproof, handmade Molex plugs that are pigtailed onto each speaker, the heat shrunk, all made for easy removal and service of each speaker. All the wiring underneath the carpet is anchored down with high visibility wire ties, heat shrunk, and LEDs in the heat shrink so you can see direction of travel of signal. All the amplifiers have their wires securely mounted with labels that clearly mark what they are, as well as QR codes that show different things in the install. Fuses for the amplifiers are easy to get to, as well as repinned factory fuse block for some of the smaller fuses. There's labeling on the heat shrink as well as QR codes, as we talked about before. Since there's no alternator, the 12 volt battery is charged off an inverter off of the 360 volt battery. This inverter has been upgraded as well. All the controls to operate the radio and stereo system operate just like a normal car. Steering wheel controls as well as controls on the radio, but with the addition of the DSP controller in the change purse area. This video shows how the factory lines and the aftermarket equipment that's in it all flow in the passenger compartment. The lines are similar, similar textures of material, which is very important. Whenever somebody gets in there, they don't know whether it was factory like that or if it was aftermarket. Here we have the factory Bose grill, and then after the new grill is put on, it's been blended out. It blends much better than factory ever did with the suede, and now the speaker can be accessed from the outside without taking the whole door off. At first it doesn't seem like the Cadillac emblem on the baffle for the mid-bass is a big deal, but this is what the factory does on their baffles, so I did it on this one. In order to get a screen that doesn't intrude on the passenger compartment, we took the factory auto-dimming mirror apart and put the controller screen up there. So not only is it easy to see, but it blends in with the factory cosmetics with the car as good as anything you can do. A 10-inch subwoofer in the front is completely cosmetically integrated by taking another factory carpet kit and cutting a square out so it covers it completely. The amplifiers were integrated in cosmetically in the back by painting the amplifier covers the same color as the car, as well as the etching on the amplifier with Evil ELR and Cadillac logo to make everything match together. We followed this theme on the processors, as well as doing the silver in the center of the processors to match the amplifiers. The upper part of the trunk area is normally open, and you can see the springs. This was all covered up and made to look completely factory. Here the completed trunk shows the suede, the leather, even the matching stitching for the leather that matches the inside. So the grills all started out just as big pieces of aluminum, except for the tweeter grill. We designed the 4-inch grill and the 6-inch grill to match the tweeter grill cosmetics, including the hexagon openings. So those started off with a flat plate piece of aluminum after it was CAD drawn, put on the CNC, milled, and then because they're such small parts, we had to router the outside edge. And that cleaned everything up, and then some small sanding. Press grills were made at that point, so that matched the opening, the cosmetic opening of the tweeter. And then everything was assembled and painted, but not painted with black paint like it looks like. It was actually painted with translucent headlight tint because the rest of the plastic in the car has a translucent look to it. So this made everything match completely cosmetically. The DSP controller was integrated into the rear view mirror as well as the change pocket. The screen itself was integrated into the rear view mirror by taking the original mirror off and taking all the auto dimming section out of it, which basically turned it into a one-way piece of glass with a mirror on it. So when the screen is dim, it's a regular mirror, but when the screen lights up, you can see through it. We also added the LED status for the amplifiers, so we can see whether there's clipping or anything that would be detrimental to the amplifiers. We can see easily at eye level. If it goes red or blinks a code, we'll know that. So the glass itself was taken apart, the screen was cut into the back of the interior piece of the mirror, and then that's folded inside, and then there's foam that sandwiches all together to make sure nothing gets messed up. Then the change pocket was taken out, and we made a exact duplicate of that change pocket out of clear acrylic, and then put the knob, remoted the knob down there on umbilical cord so everything can be unplugged so it can be serviced. Once everything was exactly as it needed to be, then it was painted with plastic dip, which gives it the same feeling as all the other buttons in the car. The pillars and the wing window were utilized to hold a 4 and a tweeter, and those were wrapped after it was molded in Alcantara suede. And then the door panel pod for the 6.5 in the door, which houses the grille as well, was all wrapped in Alcantara suede, which matches all the factory Alcantara suede. I had to buy a whole carpet kit to get one matching square of carpet so the sub box would match exactly with the factory carpet. All custom handmade RCAs are used throughout the whole install. Everything's Tex-Flex, soldered, and cut exactly to length. These RCAs use the best ends, and they're as good as any $1,000 RCAs on the market. Only because no one's ever done it before, there's LEDs that show direction of travel of the signal going front to back, and there's a pressure switch that turns those on. All the fasteners either have tapped threaded holes or steel inserts on everything to attach any part to the car. Water cooling has been added to these SE amplifiers. There's been a water jacket that goes through right by where the chips are, where all the heat's generated, and that's pumped through a computer radiator and fan system underneath the car. The whole system is controlled with the fan controller system in the amplifier. So instead of controlling the fans, it controls the pumps and how fast and how much it pumps through the radiator. In designing the system, we used a snap-on FLIR camera to measure the heat and set the controls appropriately. For the K40 radar system, the hidden radar system, there's LEDs, and we put those in the heads-up display. So it's undetectable to anybody except for the person sitting in the driver's seat. Nobody else has done this. Just to keep up on all the current trends, I used the regular method to put some diamond print in between the processors in the back. The entire processor rack, because it's just 2 light processors, uses 95-pound magnets around all the outside edges to attach multiple layers, including the plexiglass. This is also makes everything very easy to service because you just unsnap each piece and then you can get to the processors or the wiring, or if you want to disassemble the whole rack, it's very easy to do. There's a metal frame on the backside that is bolted to the car, and then everything else is magnet to it. Relief cuts are used on the inside of all the panels so that a nice finished edge on the back side of all the panels can be wrapped and then attached. The system design starts out with a layout of all the equipment that needs to go in the car and how it's going to be wired and configured. We then take our color samples out to the car and make sure that we have the right colors so we can get matching upholstery for everything. On certain cars, the system design has to figure out how you're going to get signal from the factory radio to the aftermarket amplifiers. And then we can never forget about sound dampening. Sound dampening is one of the most important things in the system. Just spending some time looking at the interior so you can make panels that match the rest of the interior and flows with the rest of the car is very important. Here's a current example of how I run all of the wires and all of the installs that I do. Making labels is an often overlooked part of an install. If everything's labeled correctly, it's much easier to service it, and anybody else can service it as well. Cosmetic integration is important, that the stereo blend in with its surroundings no matter how they look. I take great pride in being able to match any system's interior or exterior to the stereo system. Here's an example of a patinaed truck, and we did the same thing on the amplifier to make it match on the install. This box for a Corvette takes the exterior cues of the chevron and transfers those onto the box so it blends correctly. In my store, I have a 2-spindle 4x10 CNC machine and a 40x60 laser, 150 watt, as well as a 4x10 industrial Kern laser. That's 150 watt, which, because it's an industrial laser, is a lot more power. I just recently added 3D scanning capabilities for those exact measurements that we need nowadays. Even the table saw and router have exact measurement tools on them now. We are only doing exact measurements on every single tool. The table saw here just shows you how exact the measurements can get, even just using a regular table saw. One of the things that sets me apart is my ability to tune and use all of the current DSPs on the market. I make custom metal mounting brackets for just about every install now. All mounting hardware now is stainless bolts. We don't use anything but stainless bolts on mounting any equipment. Mounting 3 SE amplifiers behind the seat of a Chevy truck would be almost impossible if it weren't for using all of the metal bracketry like this. Also, this is taken into consideration on wire routing, so the wire can be appropriately tied down so it doesn't move inside the car. Here we've actually taken apart an Alpine radio and painted the trim on the outside of the radio to match the interior color of the car. This video display was made out of acrylic and the bottom plate for a TV stand, for a 55-inch TV stand. There's multiple pieces of ABS that are all bolted together with a spring-loaded mechanism on the bottom so it can all be taken apart in 3 pieces, and the base can be moved separately than the center stock and then the screen. This helps it be able to get transported to shows and hold a video screen that will play advertising videos at shows. There's a timed hole for it, so you put it in 90 degrees off, you push it in, the springs will hold it in place, and you spin it, and then it will stay locked in on its own. On this Chevy Volt project, the engine was taken out and the subwoofer box is going to go where the engine was. A 49-inch curved gaming monitor is going to be the dash, which will show the DSP controls as well as RTA. A Mustang 2 steering rack was added to this car for steering. Here's a beginning mock-up shot of the clearance for the motor that's attached to the steering rack that will actually turn the steering by remote control. The easiest way to make a one-off headliner is to chop the top off your donor car and make an exact duplicate. After the top is wrapped in aluminum tape, then you can pour 2-part foam in there and make a very cool headliner. 1x2 steel framing was used to recreate the floor after it was dropped 8 inches from its original spot. Double wall 20 gauge on the bottom, 20 gauge on the top. All hot rod style panels are redone for the floor. All of the double walled construction also has Dynamat and Dynafoam to absorb any unwanted resonances in the metal. The propulsion for this car is unique, as in it's going to use a winch motor on either side that's adapted to fit into the end of the CV axle to turn the wheels on either side. We needed a aluminum adapter plate that will match up to the winch. The first one's broke, so we made one that was 5 times as big. As you can see here, it's adapted to fit on the brake caliper mounts for a perfect fit. A quick demonstration video here of the car moving by remote control. This is a temporary remote, just to proof of concept. No current show car is complete without an airbag system. This video shows the custom-made airbag system raising and lowering. No, that's not acrylic. That's laser etched suede that glows from underneath. Another example of a car I did LEDs in the TexFlex to show direction of travel for a customer. A motorized amplifier rack that houses the batteries, also a Sony radio and DSP, so you can do demos from outside of the car from the backside. These are rotating miniguns that are attached to the hood of a show car. These were completely made from scratch using a drill motor, a drill battery, and pipe and plastic. So system design always starts with consultation with me. That's very, very important to never forget that. Smart flow charts when you're putting things together for customers is very important. Make sure that you don't forget wiring or connectors or anything else. Smart measuring tools help to make sure that you can fit the product wherever you're gonna put it. You can usually do that on drawing board. After you get your measurements, you can put that all into CAD and you can start designing products for your install. Ultimately though, it goes to layout. This is an example of amplifiers that look like they would fit with no problem, and at the end there was not enough room to mount the amplifiers and route the wiring correctly. With a 3D scanner now, we should be able to do most of the design on the computer without ever having to put amplifiers or speakers in the car. We will know they fit beforehand because we can 3D model it. Sometimes you really have to take the car apart to see what you got to work with, just like I did here. I really like to see what's underneath all of the bones of the car before I start working on it. Here's 3 examples of service manuals that I do for the cars that go through everything on the install. The ultimate goal with every system design is a happy customer. Not necessarily what I want, but what the customer wants. So my role in the shop is owner, installer, salesperson. I do everything. I'm a one-man shop. I've been that way for a long time. So the big thing for me is that I have to be self-motivated. So my role, even though I do everything, is really to keep myself motivated all the time by doing interesting projects. I think that's a big help for me. But if the boss gives the employees a headache, well, I'm going to be the one with the headache too. So my role and activities in the industry are, I help a lot of guys out doing DSP trainings. I also will remote in and help if they have some issues. A lot of times on the weekends, regular tech support's not open. So at my shop, I always have a computer up that has TeamViewer going, and I will log into their computer and help them. Sometimes I'll also give them some pointers on speaker locations and how the sound's going to interact with the interior of the vehicle in theory. I have discussions like that. So that's my biggest role and activity in helping other stores and other professionals be better at their job in our industry. So my personal and professional evolution and growth this year, I believe that I have grown professionally by learning a lot of new techniques, CAD drawing, some beginning 3D modeling, digital scanning, things like that. I think all of our professionals in our industry are going that way. I've been doing Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator for about 10 years, which is what I've been using for laser work. But using CAD now has given another dimension to that, as well as SolidWorks 360. All those programs, I think that's really been professional growth for me this year. What do I hope to have on my professional growth and personal growth this year coming up? Well, hopefully I win Installer of the Year, and that gives me the ability to work with some other high-end installers on some projects. It's always nice to have like-minded professionals working on projects together and making some really, really badass cars. that sound good and look good. All right, finally, why should I be Installer of the Year? This is always a tough question. Anybody who's truly should be Installer of the Year always has a problem with this question because we all see the talent in other people. This year, there's a lot of talented guys on the top 12, and there's even talented guys who didn't get on the list who just chose not to. I think this year, especially, I've done a really good job as far as expanding what I'm doing, building some cars that are way outside of the norm. I've also won lots of other industry awards, competition awards, Best of Shows, Triple Crowns, and I think that this year is a year that I've stepped out just a little bit more than everybody else. So that's why I think I should be Installer of the Year. All right, well, I'd like to thank everybody for watching the video, the judges, people who might be watching this on YouTube. I know it's always time taken out of your day to do this stuff, whether it be the judging or just watching videos trying to see why someone won or didn't win. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time to do that.